The gas station stood alone under the dim glow of flickering neon lights. Michael pulled his old truck into the lot, the hum of the engine breaking the silence of the desolate highway. He was used to long, lonely nights on the road, but something about this stop felt different. As he stepped out to fuel his truck, his eyes caught a figure standing by the vending machines. She wasn't dressed like someone from around here. Her long silver cloak shimmered faintly under the station lights, and her dark hood obscured most of her face. She seemed out of place, almost unreal. Michael hesitated but couldn't look away. Something about the way she moved, her cautious glances around the station, told him she wasn't just another traveler. Summoning his courage, he approached. "Need some help?" he asked, his voice calm but curious. The woman turned slowly. Her face, though mostly shadowed, caught just enough light to reveal strikingly sharp features and eyes that seemed to glow faintly with a soft, bluish hue. Michael blinked, unsure if it was a trick of the light or his exhaustion playing with his mind. "Yes," she said softly, her voice carrying an odd melodic accent that Michael had never heard before. "I need assistance." Her words were deliberate, like someone trying to speak a language they barely knew. Michael stepped closer, his curiosity overpowering his caution. "What's the problem?" he asked, glancing at the vending machine. She hesitated, clutching a strange device in her hand that looked nothing like any phone or gadget Michael had ever seen. It pulsed faintly with an internal light, its surface smooth and seamless. She glanced at it, then back at him. "It's not about this," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I'm lost. They're coming. I need your help." Michael's brow furrowed. "Who's coming?" Her glowing eyes darted around the empty station as if expecting someone, or something, to appear any second. "No time," she whispered. "I can't stay here. Please, will you help me?" Michael felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't know what kind of trouble she was in, but the fear in her voice was real. Against his better judgment, he nodded. "All right," he said cautiously. "Get in the truck." She didn't wait for him to repeat himself. Gripping her strange device tightly, she hurried to the passenger side and climbed in. Michael glanced back toward the highway, his instincts screaming that this was a bad idea. But something about her desperation, her otherworldly presence, made him feel like walking away wasn't an option. As he started the engine, he glanced at her again. She pulled back her hood slightly, revealing silvery hair that shimmered like moonlight. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael didn't reply. He shifted the truck into gear and pulled onto the empty road, unaware that this decision would change his life forever. The gas station disappeared in his rearview mirror, leaving only questions and a strange, glowing-eyed passenger beside him. The truck rumbled down the dark highway, its headlights cutting through the pitch-black night. Michael glanced at the woman sitting silently beside him. Her hands were tightly wrapped around the strange, glowing device, and her gaze remained fixed out the window, scanning the empty road as if expecting something, or someone, to appear. "So," Michael began, trying to keep his voice steady, "you want to tell me what's going on? Who are you running from?" She hesitated, her glowing blue eyes flickering toward him. For a moment, she looked like she was deciding whether to trust him. Finally, she spoke. "They are hunters," she said, her voice quiet but tense. "They track and capture people like me." Michael frowned. "People like you? You're not exactly from around here, are you?" The corner of her lips curved slightly, almost a smile, but it faded as quickly as it appeared. "No, I am not." Michael exhaled slowly, gripping the steering wheel tighter. He wasn't sure he wanted to know more, but his curiosity got the better of him. "Okay, then where are you from? And why are they after you?" "I cannot tell you everything," she replied, her voice steady, but tinged with sadness. "It's safer for you not to know. But I am from a place far from this world. I was sent here because I carry something important, something they want." She lifted the glowing device slightly, letting Michael see it more clearly. The soft, pulsating light seemed almost alive, like it had a heartbeat of its own. Michael glanced at it briefly before returning his focus to the road. "So let me guess, this thing of yours is what they're after." She nodded. "Yes. If they get it, many lives will be in danger. I cannot let that happen." Michael let out a low whistle. "Great. So now I'm in the middle of some alien fugitive situation. Just my luck." Her eyes softened as she looked at him. "I did not mean to involve you, but you were the only one who stopped. The only one who cared." Michael shook his head, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Well, you looked like you needed help. I wasn't about to just leave you there." Before she could respond, a flash of light appeared in the side mirror. Michael's heart sank. A pair of headlights was speeding toward them, gaining fast. The faint outline of a black van came into view, its sleek shape unmistakably menacing. "Is that them?" Michael asked, his voice tense. She turned quickly, her eyes narrowing. "Yes." Michael pressed the gas pedal, the truck lurching forward. The van's engine roared as it pursued them. "Any ideas on how to lose them?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Keep driving," she said, clutching the glowing device tightly. "I will handle them if they get too close." Michael glanced at her, uncertain what she meant, but the determination in her glowing eyes left no room for doubt. This was only the beginning, and he was already in deeper than he'd ever imagined. The roar of the van's engine grew louder, its headlights glaring in the side mirror. Michael gritted his teeth, pushing his truck to its limit on the narrow highway. The alien woman, Zara, sat rigid in her seat, her glowing device pulsing more intensely as if sensing the danger. "Can't this thing go any faster?" she asked, her voice calm but urgent. "It's a truck, not a race car." Michael shot back, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. He swerved around a curve, the tires screeching against the asphalt. "What do they want with you so badly?" "It's not just me," Zara said, glancing at the glowing device. "This is more valuable than you can imagine. They'll destroy anyone who gets in their way." "Well, that's comforting," Michael muttered, his heart pounding as the van inched closer. The black vehicle was sleek, its design far too advanced for an ordinary car. It didn't just look dangerous, it was dangerous. Suddenly, a beam of light shot from the van, hitting the road just behind the truck. The impact sent chunks of asphalt flying into the air. Michael cursed loudly. What the hell was that? "They have plasma weapons," Zara said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Primitive but effective. I can disable them. But I need a moment." "A moment? We don't have a moment," Michael yelled, swerving again as another beam narrowly missed them. "Do something now." Zara took a deep breath, her glowing device coming to life in her hands. A soft hum filled the truck's cabin, and the lights on the dashboard flickered briefly. Michael glanced at her, half in awe and half in terror. "What are you doing?" "I am creating interference," she said, her eyes glowing brighter. "It will disrupt their systems, but it takes time." The van gained on them, pulling up alongside the truck. Michael could see the driver now, a tall figure in dark armor with a helmet that glowed faintly red. The passenger window rolled down, revealing a sleek weapon aimed directly at them. "Oh no, you don't," Michael shouted, jerking the wheel to the right. The truck slammed into the van's side, sending it swerving momentarily. The weapon discharged, the plasma beam flying harmlessly into the trees. Zara didn't flinch. Her device pulsed brighter, and the hum grew louder. "Almost ready," she said, her voice focused. The van recovered quickly, pulling up beside them again. The armored figure raised the weapon once more, but before he could fire, Zara pressed a button on her device. A sharp, high-pitched sound filled the air, followed by a burst of blue light. The van's headlights flickered, and its engine sputtered. The vehicle swerved violently before coming to a screeching halt on the side of the road. Michael exhaled in relief, his grip on the wheel loosening. "Nice work," he said, glancing at Zara. "But we're not out of this yet, are we?" Zara shook her head, her expression grim. "No, this was just the beginning." The truck sped down the highway, the dark forest on either side blurring into an endless wall of shadows. Michael's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Beside him, Zara sat silently, her glowing device now dim, her expression a mix of exhaustion and focus. "They're not giving up, are they?" Michael asked, breaking the tense silence. "No," Zara replied softly. "They will regroup and come back. They always do." Michael sighed, glancing at the fuel gauge. The needle hovered dangerously close to empty. "We need to stop soon. This truck's running on fumes." Zara turned her glowing eyes toward him. "Stopping is dangerous. They will track us." "Well, unless you can make fuel out of thin air, we don't have much choice," he replied, pulling off the highway onto a dirt road. The truck bounced over the uneven path, heading deeper into the forest. After a few miles, they came upon an old, abandoned barn. Its roof sagged, and the wooden walls were weathered with age, but it was hidden well by the surrounding trees. Michael parked the truck behind the barn, shutting off the engine. The sudden silence was almost deafening. "This will have to do," he said, stepping out and stretching his aching legs. "Not exactly five-star accommodations, but at least it's off the radar." Zara followed him, her movements graceful despite the tension. She scanned the area with a wary gaze, her hand never leaving the device. "This place is primitive," she said, her tone neutral, "but it will suffice for now." Michael chuckled dryly. "Glad it meets your standards, princess." She raised an eyebrow at him, but there was a faint glimmer of amusement in her glowing eyes. "I am not a princess." "Could have fooled me," he muttered, grabbing a flashlight from the truck and heading toward the barn. Inside, the air was musty, and cobwebs hung like curtains in the corners. Michael cleared a small area on the floor, setting up a makeshift space for them to rest. Zara sat down carefully, her device resting in her lap. Michael watched her for a moment, curiosity gnawing at him. "So," he began, "what's the deal with that thing? It's more than just a fancy flashlight, isn't it?" Zara hesitated, then nodded. "It is a power core. It can generate energy far beyond anything your world has created. It is why they hunt me." Michael frowned, leaning against a wooden beam. "And what happens if they get it?" "They will use it to dominate entire systems," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "Millions would suffer." Michael let out a low whistle. "No pressure, huh?" A sudden noise outside made both of them freeze. Footsteps, soft but deliberate, crunched against the gravel. Michael grabbed a rusty crowbar lying nearby, motioning for Zara to stay quiet. The footsteps stopped just outside the barn. Michael's heart pounded as he tightened his grip on the crowbar. Whoever, or whatever, was out there, they weren't alone anymore. The air inside the barn felt heavy, every creak of the wooden beams amplifying the silence. Michael's grip on the crowbar tightened as he motioned for Zara to stay hidden behind a stack of old hay bales. Her glowing eyes dimmed slightly as she crouched low, clutching the device to her chest. The footsteps outside stopped. For a moment, Michael thought whoever was out there might have moved on. But then came the unmistakable sound of something metallic sliding against the barn door. His heart sank. Someone, or something, was trying to get in. Michael crept toward the door, his boots barely making a sound on the dusty floor. He peeked through a crack in the wooden planks, his breath hitching at the sight. A dark figure in sleek black armor stood just outside, its glowing red visor scanning the area. The same kind of figure that had been in the van earlier. "Zara," Michael whispered, barely audible. "It's one of them." She didn't respond immediately, but when she did, her voice was calm but firm. "Do not let them see you. If they find me, they will call for reinforcements." "Yeah, I kinda figured that," Michael muttered, his pulse racing. He knew he had to act fast. If the bounty hunter got inside, they wouldn't stand a chance. The barn door creaked open slightly, the figure stepping inside. Its movements were unnaturally precise, its helmet swiveling back and forth as it scanned the dark interior. Michael pressed himself against the wall, his knuckles white around the crowbar. He needed to distract it, to lead it away from Zara. An idea struck him. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his truck keys. With a quick, quiet motion, he tossed them across the barn. They clattered loudly against the far wall, the sound echoing through the space. The figure turned instantly, its visor glowing brighter as it marched toward the noise. Michael held his breath, slipping around the edge of the barn to stay out of sight. Zara's glowing eyes peeked over the hay bales, watching him intently. The bounty hunter stopped near the keys, scanning the area with a device on its wrist. Michael knew he didn't have much time. He spotted an old rope hanging from the ceiling and quickly formulated a risky plan. Gripping the crowbar, he climbed onto a low beam, positioning himself above the intruder. Zara seemed to realize what he was doing and gave him a small nod of encouragement. Michael took a deep breath, steadied himself, and jumped. The crowbar came down hard on the figure's helmet, the impact sending a loud metallic clang through the barn. The bounty hunter staggered but didn't fall. It turned sharply, grabbing for Michael with inhuman speed. Michael barely dodged, rolling to the ground as the figure raised its weapon. Before it could fire, a sudden flash of blue light filled the barn. Zara stood tall, her device glowing brilliantly. The bounty hunter froze, its systems clearly overwhelmed by the energy pulse. "Run!" Zara shouted, grabbing Michael's arm. Without hesitation, they bolted from the barn, leaving the stunned bounty hunter behind. The night swallowed them once more as they disappeared into the forest. But Michael knew the fight was far from over. The night air was cool as Michael and Zara sprinted through the thick forest, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the soft, damp earth beneath them. The moon barely peeked through the dense canopy of trees, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly in the darkness. Behind them, the barn was still visible as a faint silhouette, but the bounty hunter wasn't far behind. Michael's breath came in ragged gasps, his muscles screaming for rest. "We can't outrun them forever," he panted, glancing over his shoulder. "Where are we going?" Zara's pace never slowed. "We are close," she said, her voice calm despite the urgency in her steps. "Keep moving." Michael didn't question her. He had learned to trust her instincts, even if he didn't fully understand everything about her yet. They weaved through the trees, ducking under branches and leaping over fallen logs until they reached a small clearing. In the center stood a strange, low structure covered in vines and moss. At first, it looked like nothing more than a rock formation, but as Zara approached, she pressed a hidden panel on the ground, causing a section of the earth to slide away. Michael's eyes widened as the ground opened to reveal a sleek, silver craft buried just beneath the surface. The ship gleamed under the dim moonlight, its surface smooth and seamless. The air around it hummed with an unfamiliar energy, almost like it was alive. "This is your ship?" Michael asked, incredulity in his voice. "Yes," Zara replied, stepping forward and placing her hand on the ship's surface. The moment her fingers made contact, the ship's lights flickered to life, and a soft whirring sound echoed from within. Michael watched, amazed. "I thought it was destroyed." "It was," Zara said, glancing over her shoulder at him. "But I have repaired it as much as I could. It is not fully functional, but it will be enough to escape." "Escape? You're leaving Earth." Michael felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Part of him wanted her to stay, to be safe, but another part knew that she couldn't stay hidden forever. Zara paused, her glowing eyes meeting his. "I must. The longer I remain here, the greater the risk to you. You have helped me more than I could have ever hoped. But if I stay, they will find you." Michael frowned, his heart sinking. "I don't want you to go." "I know," she said softly, "but this is the only way." She walked to the entrance of the ship, pulling a panel aside to reveal the interior. Inside, The walls were lined with strange symbols and technology that Michael could barely comprehend. The air smelled faintly of metal and ozone. Zara stepped inside, and Michael followed hesitantly. "Are you sure this will work?" he asked, looking around at the unfamiliar controls. Zara nodded. "I have the knowledge to power it up. It may take a few minutes." Michael's eyes kept scanning the sky, waiting for any signs of movement from the bounty hunters. He knew they wouldn't be far behind, and they needed to leave as quickly as possible. "Do you have any idea where you're going?" he asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Zara hesitated, her fingers hovering over the control panel. "To my people. They will know how to finish what we started." Michael watched her for a moment, unsure of what to say. His gut told him this wasn't the end. Something about this journey, this connection between them, wasn't over. But for now, he had to let her go. A soft hum filled the air as the ship powered up, its engines coming to life. The doors slid shut, sealing them inside. Michael buckled into the nearest seat, glancing at Zara one last time. "We're ready," she said quietly. With a sudden rush of air, the ship lifted off the ground, soaring into the sky. Michael watched Earth disappear below them, his mind racing with questions and thoughts he couldn't fully understand. But one thing was certain. This was only the beginning of something much bigger. The ship rose smoothly into the sky, the forest below shrinking rapidly as they ascended. Michael's heart pounded in his chest, but it wasn't just from the rush of the liftoff. It was because of the overwhelming sense of being far away from everything he knew. The stars outside the window seemed so close, as though he could reach out and touch them. But there was no time to enjoy the view. Zara sat at the controls, her fingers moving with precision, pressing buttons and making adjustments that Michael could barely follow. The hum of the ship's engines was steady, but a feeling of unease hung in the air. Michael could sense it, too, and urgency in the way Zara worked, like she was preparing for something far worse. "Are we safe?" Michael asked, his voice breaking the silence. Zara didn't look at him, but replied calmly, "Not yet. The bounty hunters will have already sent a signal to their allies. It won't be long before they find us." Michael's mind raced. The threat was far from over, and now it seemed like they were flying into even greater danger. "What do we do then?" "There is only one way to escape them," Zara said, her eyes flickering briefly to the control panel. "I need to activate the ship's cloaking device, but it is damaged. The process is dangerous, and it requires more power than this ship can generate on its own. I will have to use the energy core." Michael's eyes widened. "Wait, that thing is what they want. You're going to risk using it to save us?" "Yes," Zara answered without hesitation, her gaze unwavering. "It's our only chance." Michael felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The energy core was far too important to her people. Using it now, when they were so close to being discovered, seemed like an impossible choice. But he could see the determination in Zara's eyes, the same look she had when they were fleeing from the bounty hunters. "Can't we just hide for a while, somewhere on Earth?" Michael suggested, his mind working quickly to think of any alternatives. "I cannot hide much longer," Zara replied. "The longer I stay in this system, the more risk I bring to you. I must leave. And I must finish what I started." Michael nodded slowly. He understood now that there was no going back for her, and, in a strange way, for him either. He had been caught up in this alien conflict, whether he liked it or not. And he knew Zara was right. If they didn't act now, it would be too late. The ship's engines whined as Zara made adjustments. "We don't have much time," she said, looking at Michael. "I will need your help." Michael sat up straighter in his seat, ready to do whatever was needed. "What do I need to do?" "Hold the ship steady," Zara instructed. "If I activate the core, it will send out an energy pulse that will temporarily disable their tracking systems. But it will also cause a massive surge. I need you to keep the ship steady during the activation process." Michael didn't hesitate. "All right, let's do it." Zara's fingers hovered over the controls, her eyes scanning the data rapidly. The ship was almost at its maximum altitude now, and Michael felt a jolt as the ship began to shake. The energy pulse was starting to charge. "Get ready," Zira warned, and with a final press of a button, she activated the core. Suddenly, the ship rocked violently as a blinding blue light filled the cabin. Michael gripped the armrests, his knuckles white. He could feel the pulse, like a shockwave that passed through him, vibrating his entire body. "Steady, Michael," Zara shouted over the noise. With all his strength, Michael held onto the controls, willing the ship to stay on course. The shaking was intense, and the energy pulse was blinding, but slowly it began to subside. The ship's lights flickered before stabilizing. The ship was still in the air, and for a moment, the silence that followed felt almost deafening. "We did it," Zara said quietly, her voice filled with relief. Michael's heart was still racing, but he allowed himself a deep breath. "You're sure we're safe now?" Zara nodded. "For now. But we are not out of danger yet. We must find a safe place to regroup." Michael looked out the window, watching Earth shrink into a distant blur. "Then let's find that safe place." The stars stretched out before them, endless and cold, as the ship glided silently through the dark expanse of space. Michael sat strapped into his seat, staring at the controls in front of him, his mind still racing from the chaos of the past few hours. His thoughts kept circling back to one thing: Zira. She had been so determined, so focused on escaping the bounty hunters. But now that they were alone in space, far from Earth, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't over. Zara had saved them so far, but how long could they keep running? "You're thinking too much." Zira's voice cut through the silence, her tone calm as always. She was seated at the ship's controls, her fingers moving across the panel with practiced ease. Michael glanced at her, still processing everything that had happened. "Can you blame me? We just used up your only hope of getting away." Zara looked up at him, her glowing eyes meeting his. "That energy pulse gave us time. Now we must use it wisely." "Yeah, but how much time do we really have?" Michael leaned forward in his seat, his gaze shifting to the stars outside. "The hunters will come for you. They'll find us." "Not if we stay ahead," she said, her voice steady. "I've sent a message to my people. They will find us, but we must be patient." A long silence passed between them. Michael thought about Earth, the life he'd left behind. The simple, quiet life he knew so well seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by the strange, constant danger of being involved in Zira's world. "We can't keep running forever," Michael said finally, his voice quiet. Zira's eyes softened, but her expression remained serious. "You are right. We cannot. But this fight is not over yet. We will take the fight to them." Michael raised an eyebrow, confused. "What do you mean? Take the fight to them?" Zira nodded. "I have a plan, but it requires you to trust me completely." She paused, her fingers brushing the glowing device in her lap. "The bounty hunters think they can catch us, but we will make them believe they've already lost." Michael leaned back in his seat, skeptical. "And how are we supposed to do that?" Zira's eyes sparkled with a kind of fierce determination. "We're going to lead them into a trap." Michael's mind raced as he processed her words. "A trap? What kind of trap?" "A trap that will make them believe they've won," Zira explained. "They'll come after us, but they won't expect us to fight back." Michael rubbed his chin, still unsure. "So, you want to fake our defeat?" "Yes. I will need your help to make it convincing," Zira said, her voice steady. "We can use the ship's remaining energy to create a false signal, a distress signal that will lead them to believe they found us. We'll make it seem like we're cornered." "And then what?" Michael asked, still not sure where this was going. "Then we'll strike," Zira said with a determined smile. "When they think they've won, we'll turn the tables. We'll destroy their fleet, and we'll finally be free." Michael took a deep breath. It sounded risky, too risky. But then he looked at Zira, at the woman who had shown him bravery and strength when everything seemed lost. He didn't fully understand her plan, but he knew one thing. He was in this with her now. There was no turning back. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "Let's do it." Zara nodded, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you, Michael. This will be our final stand." The ship's engines hummed as Zara began working the controls, sending out a faint distress signal into the vast emptiness of space. It would take time for the bounty hunters to react, but Zara's plan was set in motion. They were about to face the final battle, and Michael knew there was no going back. Now, whatever happened next, they were ready to fight. Zara's plan might be their last hope, and Michael could only trust in the choices they made together. The universe outside felt as cold and vast as ever, but inside the ship they had something they hadn't had before, a chance, and they were going to take it. As the ship cruised toward their target, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose he hadn't known he was missing. For once, he wasn't just running away. He was standing up, ready to fight for something greater than himself. The countdown to the final stand had begun. The hum of the ship's engines filled the cabin, steady and constant as Michael and Zara prepared for the final phase of their plan. The bounty hunters were coming. Michael could feel it. The faint distress signal they had sent out was working. Soon, the enemy would arrive, believing they had trapped them. Zara sat at the controls, her fingers flying over the panel with practiced precision. Her expression was focused, but there was a tension in her shoulders, something Michael hadn't noticed before. Despite all the calmness she projected, there was something weighing heavily on her. "Are you sure about this?" Michael asked, breaking the silence. "I mean, I get the plan, but we're really going to make them think they've won, and then strike back." Zara's glowing eyes met his for a brief moment. Her voice was calm, but there was an underlying edge to it. "Yes, it is the only way to ensure their defeat. If we don't act like we're losing, they won't be caught off guard when we make our move." Michael frowned but didn't argue. He trusted her, but there was still a part of him that wasn't entirely convinced this was the right course of action. "And what about after, when it's over?" Zara looked down at the glowing device in her hands, her fingers tracing the edges. It seemed to pulse softly, as if reacting to her touch. "When it's over, I will return home. I will bring what I came for, and my people will take care of the rest." Michael's heart sank. "You're leaving Earth again?" She nodded slowly, her eyes distant. "Yes, I cannot stay here. It is not safe for you, or for me." The weight of her words hung in the air, thick and heavy. Michael knew this was coming, but hearing it from her still hurt. He had grown to care about Zara. She wasn't just some alien to him anymore. She was someone he had risked everything for. And now, it seemed like it was all coming to an end. "But I thought you'd want to stay," Michael said quietly. Zara's gaze softened. "I would like nothing more, but my mission is bigger than both of us, and I cannot change that." Michael sat back in his seat, his thoughts swirling. He had tried to convince himself that helping her was the right thing to do. But now that it was almost over, he wasn't sure he was ready to say goodbye. It wasn't just her mission anymore. It had become his too. Suddenly, a loud beep interrupted his thoughts. Zara's fingers flew over the controls, and her face grew more serious. The bounty hunters were close now, their ships nearing. She turned to Michael. "It's time," she said, her voice steady. "You know what to do." Michael nodded, taking a deep breath. This was it. There was no turning back now. He had to trust in Zara and the plan they had put into motion. The enemy was coming for them, and they were ready. As the enemy ships closed in, Zara initiated the final phase of their trap. The ship's systems flickered, sending out false signals that would lead the hunters to believe they had the upper hand. It was all or nothing. Michael gripped the controls tightly. He knew the next few minutes could change everything. "We're ready," Zara said, her voice firm. "Whatever happens, Michael, I will never forget what you've done." The ship shook as the enemy ships locked onto them, but they were about to find out just how wrong they were. The countdown to the final stand had begun. The ship lurched violently as the first of the enemy ships closed in. Michael's heart pounded in his chest, every second feeling like a countdown to something much bigger. The sound of enemy weapons charging up filled the cabin, sending a shiver down his spine. He glanced at Sarah, who was calm but determined. She had prepared for this moment, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a battle, it was the end of something. "You ready?" Michael asked, his voice steady despite the rising tension. Sarah didn't look at him as she adjusted the ship's trajectory. "Ready as we'll ever be." The enemy ships began to fire, their weapons blasting beams of energy toward them. Michael felt the ship shake as the first hit made contact, sending a shockwave through the cabin. But Sarah was quick, her fingers flying over the controls as she activated the ship's defenses. The energy shields flickered, absorbing the blasts. But they weren't going to last long. "We have to move faster," Michael said, his voice growing more urgent. "They're closing in." "I know," Sarah replied, her face hardening. "But we need them to believe we're losing. Once they think they have us cornered, we can strike." Michael's mind raced. He understood the plan. He had trusted it so far, but he didn't know how much longer they could keep this up. The enemy ships were relentless. He could feel the tension building, the countdown ticking down to their last chance. A bright flash lit up the cabin as another blast rocked the ship. The shields flickered again, weakening. Michael's grip on the controls tightened. "We don't have much time," he shouted. "They're almost on us." Sarah turned to him, her eyes filled with resolve. "Trust me, Michael. We can do this." As if on cue, the enemy ships made their final move, closing the gap and preparing to deliver the killing blow. But just as they were about to fire, Sarah activated the cloaking device. The ship disappeared into the void, hidden from their sensors. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The enemy ships passed by, unaware of their sudden disappearance. Sarah's eyes shone with a quiet triumph. "Now," she said, her voice steady. "Now we strike." She quickly turned the ship around, positioning it perfectly to take the enemies by surprise. Michael's breath caught in his throat as she fired the ship's weapons, sending powerful blasts toward the unsuspecting enemy ships. The first hit caused one of the enemy ships to explode in a fiery burst of light. The others scrambled to react, but it was too late. The battle was over. Michael watched as the last enemy ship went down in a ball of fire, leaving nothing but debris in space. The silence that followed was deafening. They had won. But as the ship hovered in the aftermath, Michael turned to Sarah, his thoughts clouded with uncertainty. "We did it," he said, but his voice was heavy with something else. "Regret." Sarah didn't respond right away. She looked at him, her face softening for a brief moment. "We did," she said quietly. "But the journey isn't over yet." Michael's heart sank as he realized what she meant. The battle was won, but the war wasn't over for her. She still had a mission, and it would take her away from Earth, and away from him. I wish you didn't have to leave," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but firm. "I know," she said softly, "but this is what I must do. And you. Your courage, your strength, it has changed everything." For a long moment, they simply stood there, the weight of the situation settling between them. Michael felt a deep sense of loss, but he knew she was right. She had to return to her people, to finish what she had started. Sarah's ship slowly turned, heading toward the stars, and Michael knew this was the last time he would see her. As the ship disappeared into the vastness of space, he couldn't help but feel that he had been a part of something bigger than himself, something unforgettable. And as the ship faded into the distance, Michael whispered to the stars, "Goodbye, Sarah. I'll never forget you."